Good morning, good afternoon, it's 12:01, and welcome everyone to our third episode in our series of continuing the conversation, celebrating success stories and outdoor recreation. Our third episode is entitled Indigenous Collaboration in Outdoor Recreation, and I will introduce and allow our speakers to introduce themselves. Before we get started, I'd like to run through a few reminders. First of all, this episode will be recorded and shared, meaning that if you have to hop off, if you want to look at it another time and really think about it, you will be able to do that. We will also share the slides, and we'll ask you to submit comments or questions in the chat box, which is on the upper bar of your screen. We'll handle questions and comments at the end to allow for the natural flow of conversation between our esteemed guests. So what we're going to cover today is we're going to follow a theme that we've followed throughout our webinar episodes, that will be asking our speakers to talk about a challenge and an approach that they have faced, how the challenge or approach built momentum for future work, and to share lessons learned and any advice. To back up for a minute, this continuing conversation webinar series grew out of the Outdoor Recreation Summit that we had in person in Butte last year. Our top panels and our top discussions that we had, we thought, well, let's deepen it a little bit and let's really look at some on-the-ground practical success stories about how folks have worked together. This webinar grew out of a session that Kqyn Kuka, who's one of our guests, facilitated, and it was really quite amazing. And it was a discussion among Indigenous leaders about their experiences in the outdoor recreation space, both on their reservations and off the reservations. So that's what we're going to talk about today. So with that, I'll introduce myself. My name is Diane Conradi. I'm the founder and CEO of Montana Access Project. We, along with the University of Montana, hosted the webinars and the Outdoor Recreation Summit last year. And what Montana Access Project does is partner with rural communities for whom the outdoors is at the heart of their economic vitality and health and wellness of both residents and visitors. With that, I'm going to turn it over to Kqyn and Aaron to introduce themselves.
Me first. Kqyn wants me to go first, so
It's alphabetical.
we're going alphabetical. My name's Aaron Brien. I'm the preservation officer for the Crow tribe. Our job really is to enforce the major cultural resource laws, federal laws especially. So we're funded out of the National Park Service, but we're appointed by our tribes to represent them in cultural resource matters. So, but that bleeds into other things like curriculum development, ethnographic work, research, even kind of into the tribal we represent our tribe sometimes, and social functions and things like that. But our main duty is to be the Crow tribe's cultural resource advocate, both on and off the reservation, specifically in federal undertaking. So that's what I do. So consult a lot with state and federal agencies on these projects on the mitigation of adverse effect to cultural resources. So we go from anywhere from 4 to 12 meetings in a week. I think in 2021 and 22 we received almost 8,000 requests for services. So that varies from all those federal undertakings that I mentioned, but also Native American Graves Protection and Repatriation Act on top of the Montana Antiquities Act. But we also consult in North and South Dakota, parts of Nebraska, northern Colorado, and Wyoming. So yeah, we're busy. We're very busy, and I don't mean to ignore people, but I often do because the phone calls don't end, and if I don't turn my phone off or hide from people, I don't get a rest. So I'm learning that it's okay for me to ignore people.
So we're privileged to have him with us today because we get a couple hours of his time. Tell us where you grew up, though. That's important.
I grew up in Crow Agency, Montana, so our reservation is separated by districts, which, for those of you who don't know, the tribes in Montana are set up as what's called domestic dependent nations, which are sovereigns. So, but there's a federal oversight that happens on the reservation. That's the Bureau of Indian Affairs, but we don't need to get into that. Um, I'll get frustrated and start arguing with everybody. But our reservation is set up in districts. So I grew up in what's called the Center Lodge District, which is, I don't want to say equivalent to a state, but our legislative body on the reservation has 3 representatives from each district. So um, I lived in several places in that district. So, but mostly Crow Agency. In my high school years, we moved to Hardin, which is just right off the reservation, but it's a native town. And then after high school, I moved to the Flathead Reservation. I lived there for quite some time, and I got my education, got married, and had kids, and um, moved back home. And when I became the preservation officer,
So I'm Kqyn Kuka, and I'm the tribal liaison and diversity coordinator for Montana Fish, Wildlife, and Parks. I've been with my agency for 18 years, and the first 13 years I was in the enforcement division. And I bring that up because there's a couple of stories I'll talk about that are from my game warden days. And I was born in Browning on the Blackfeet Reservation. I grew up there until about grade school, and then I moved to Great Falls. My dad he was an art teacher in Browning. Then he became a full-time artist. And then he became a professor at a reservation art institute in the Rosebud Sioux area. And I followed him down there. And I lived on 3 different reservations, but I call Great Falls home. I got my education at the Salish and Kootenai College. And so Aaron's son and my daughter were playmates. Um, but we really didn't get to know each other until this career when we both entered into these positions. And so I bring that up because I consider myself an urban Indian and I have a different perspective than Aaron. And I value our differences because it's what this whole presentation is about, understanding our differences and coming together, collaborating, and we both got comfortable being uncomfortable, and now we're using it to the good. And so I'll bring that up a lot in this presentation. My job as a liaison is I have 2 governments. So like Aaron said, the sovereign government and the state of Montana. And so I like to put this in people's heads when I talk about my position, because if we go into Canada or we go into Mexico, we follow their rules, we embrace their culture, we're intrigued by their clothing and their language and their food, and we should be doing that with the 8 countries in Montana. And so for me, they have their own government and the state has their own government. I'm the bridge. And so they will say, Kqyn, I need this. And the tribes will say, Kqyn, I need this. And I bridge and align the 2 governments. So I find the right person on each end
and put them at the table. I don't necessarily make choices. I'm not a decision maker. I'm more of the bridge. So remember that. And you have to be nice to your bridges. You have to maintain them and appreciate where they get you.
Treat your bridges good.
Treat your
If you
bridges
learned
good. We're
anything
gonna get
today,
you a bumper sticker. Treat your bridges good.
yeah.
Okay. Well, I have to say this is absolutely not scripted, and we are leaving it up to our folks to talk about how they work together on either end of the bridge. And so I'd like you two to talk about maybe a practical example of what a challenge was that you have found with both of your roles, both of your work, and both of your different background, and how you kind of worked through it.
So one of the challenges, do you want to talk about the one you're going to show the picture? There we go. This one was Montana had FWP worked really hard out of the Billings office to work with this particular landowner. And if we got access to this property and purchased it, it would open up 110,000 acres of public land. And so when it was all said and done, I didn't work on that directly. They called me and said, Kqyn, we'd like tribal representation there. And that's kind of how this story begins. The property is in the Snowy Mountains, and it is in the Aboriginal territory, or the historic Crow country. And so I called Aaron and said, hey, would you like to join me? And I'm trying to get, one representative from each tribe to come to this ribbon cutting. The governor would like to have some tribal representation from each nation. And, if you want to come, or who would you recommend? And that's kind of how this starts.
Yeah, what do you want me to say now?
So when I called you, Aaron was reluctant, and I didn't think he would be. I thought he would enjoy, this. And so this is where the learning begins.
So I'm not a big fan of like I don't know how to say that, like pomp and circumstance are kind of the presentation or the pageantry of government work. Like I've never been a big fan of like um our chairman always tells us, he says, the chairman of the Crow tribe, Franke, he says, we celebrate, let's celebrate when the baby's born, not when it's conceived.
Hmm.
And so it sounds crazy, but I'm not a big fan of like golden shovels, but rather the ribbon cuttings, but I don't go to those things. So anyway, but part of this was we weren't involved in any of the consultation or any of the project of the Snowy Mountains. So that alone was kind of a weird thing to be, well, can you guys come and um, be a part of this? But at the same time, there's some apprehension because we want to put our stamp of approval on things that we know about and things that we know we were part of the conversation, we were part of it. So that was kind of part of that issue. The other thing was I didn't really want to do it, like just for my own personal, I didn't want to like give a talk. I didn't want to, I that's just not my style all the time. So I asked the chairman, I said, hey, Kqyn Kuka, the tribal liaison for Fish, Wildlife, and Parks called, and this is what they want. Do you want to go or do you want to send one of the other executives? And he says, no, I want you to go. And it's all because I had just told him I don't want to do those kinds of things. So I think he was like testing me. He said, no, you got to go. She called you. I want you to go up there. So I had to tie my boots up and go.
And so that right there was my number one lesson was, and I'm in this position fairly new, maybe 1 or 2 years, but I'm learning, and I kind of hit the ground running with a lot of different things. And this was my first ask to get tribal representation to celebrate this. And so my lesson was they want to be asked at the beginning. They want to be part of it at the beginning, not at the end. And that failure built a relationship with us. or strengthened our relationship too. And it also, there's cultural historic presence there that I didn't even know about. So after it's all said and done and it's open to the public, we go look around and find all this presence of historic, rock formations and teepee rings and things that our historic and preservation office on our side wants to know about, as well as his side. And so it was like, whoa, this is where the beginning should have took place, not at the end or the consultation. And so while we're there, I'm under the impression, I'm proud that we have tribal representation, and I'm happy that their voice gets to be heard today. So that's kind of my energy at this ribbon cutting. And so I walk up to Aaron because he's really good at speaking, and a lot of people like to hear what he has to say. I asked him if he wanted to say the prayer. So second mistake when made for the day. Tell me about that.
I'm not a big fan of doing those kinds of things, partly because when you ask people to do to pray in Crow, we say like be watch, like yeah, like I'm gonna ask for something good, or some good fortune. So you have to pay for that. So Crows have a firm belief in the transfer of luck. Like you can buy and sell luck. And I know that's different from the the church, but it's Crow belief and it's always existed. So that also means that you can go to somebody when you're down and out and you see them as successful, and you can say, I want some of your luck. And that person will tell you what to do and make wishes for you. But you have to pay for that, meaning you give the same four gifts. You'll give these gifts. So one of my things is I got that as a hang up. So when somebody asks me, and it sounds petty, it might sound petty in like American culture or like the church culture, but it's a reality. When you ask somebody to pray in Crow culture, you have to give them something. So I knew that wasn't going to happen. Secondly, um, I I I know when things aren't normal for that thing. So like if Fish, Wildlife and Parks gets together all the time, or the governor gets together all the time, and they don't have prayers before their meetings, and so why now? So is it simply because Native people are there? I know we're not the only people that like to pray and that believe in prayer. So there's kind of this artificial approach to the prayer and I'm not saying that's what you believe, Kqyn, but I'm just saying like in general, when we go to these things, they'll say, let's pray. And I'm like, well, I know that's not normally what you guys do, and don't assume just because I'm a Native person that I'm gonna want to not only pray here, but I'm going to want to do it in front of cameras, and I'm going to want to do it in front of the governor. And perhaps if that consultation would have happened earlier, those kinds of things would have been known. So I'm just not a big fan of it. I do believe in the power of wish making and asking for good luck. And so I made up for it though in my own kind of way, and made a wish for people who come to visit that place. So, but it was still kind of done on my own terms, I guess you could say. Um, I'm rambling now.
So my second lesson was, like Aaron said, is this a place of prayer? Is this the right time? And instead of kind of just pushing that on him, I should have asked first. So he taught me that really quick, very impromptu. I went around and asked, a couple of the others and said, hey, are you prepared to say a prayer, and would you like to? And that's where you see Marvin Weatherwax, and you can see him behind Aaron here with his headdress on. So he typically does do those prayers, and he was prepared. So now you have to remember what I said, get comfortable being uncomfortable. And my time as a game warden was 13 years of conflict resolution. So I have thicker skin, and that's what I ask of you guys, is don't take this personal and say, well, geez, Aaron was he didn't help me, or I take it personal and I could be offended. You think on your feet and you respect it. And so why is it so much different than if we were to go into another country and they said, no, we don't do that. We kind of accept it and go, oh, I'm sorry, I didn't know. But we don't do that in Indian country. we kind of just generalize and we're vague sometimes. And so my second lesson was just ask. So like he said, he did make up for it, but on the scene, it was so beautiful what he said. They each got a chance to talk, just to say, you know, what does it mean working with government? What does it mean here today to you? And some were very happy and in saying, you know, we're happy to be here. We're happy to be invited. Thank you for having us. Because ultimately we don't have to, other than Aaron's position, because he has to look at those resources before they're disturbed. But I should have had them there at the beginning, even if they don't have to. I always have this thought in my head as a liaison. Some people have kind of challenged me and said, well, what do you want my knowledge for? What do you want my prayers for? What do you want me there for? It's your property. You're going to do whatever you want. And I said, I advocate for a seat at the table for our Indian people. Be there, because if you don't, we're going to fill it with information we think is correct. And this is a chance for you to actually speak on behalf of the Crow people. So Aaron gets up and he talks about the mountains, what they were called in Crow.
Oh, you're gonna ask, man, just because you're asking me, it's escaping me.
And he said, we are wishful people. And he made the wish, like you said, and the wish was for anyone who entered the wildlife management area to be blessed and good things happen.
Yeah, I think I said that they would fare well and that they would have good luck or
Because
good fortune. Yeah.
And the Crow believed in those things, and he talked a little bit about what he just told you. And so it was so much what I was looking for when I thought that was a prayer, right? So you just kind of sometimes have to be okay to accept differences.
Something to consider is I know on the surface it kind of seems like, well, Aaron's just kind of like being confrontational or stubborn. But if you look at it from who I represent, the resources I represent, Lewistown, which isn't that far from where we were at, was actually supposed to be the Crow agency. So we were moved from the first Crow agency at Fort Parker, which is by Livingston on Mission Creek, to the Absorki agency, which is really the Crow word for Absaloga. So they just Absaroka turned into Absorki. So that was the second Crow agency. Now, before they forcefully move us to the Little Bighorn, where the Crow agency is today, we were supposed to go to Lewistown, which is now called Reed's Cabin. That was the first agency built, and there's a historic monument there. It ended up becoming kind of a trading post, but that was supposed to be the first building for what would have been the third Crow agency. So, but as in some shisty deals, we were removed then from the Musselshell country and that area between what is now Fort Belknap and from the Milk River into the Musselshell country, and then placed on the Little Bighorn. So really, if you consider all of that, what we're being asked to do is come and celebrate the Snowy Mountains going into state ownership. So it's another owner that is not Crow that is celebrating the opening of this when it was originally in the ownership of the Crow people. So it's a weird position to be in, to be like, my job is to advocate for Crow land and Crow resources. My belief is that land should go back to the Crow people. So that's always going to be my belief, right? That's always going to be what I advocate for. So I'm now being asked to come and celebrate it going into the state of Montana. So it's a weird position for me to be in, because we're in a constant state of fighting over scraps that used to be ours, So
And for me, that third lesson is what I think all of us should understand, as this stuff isn't that long ago. So my grandma, my dad's grandma, great grandma, was born in a teepee in 1883. She lived to be 104, so I have memories of her. But that's the same era that Aaron's talking about. She was removed from her communal living with her family and forced into allotments and on the reservation. It was the first time the reservation ever existed. And she's teaching my dad these lessons, and she's telling these stories in Blackfeet, and he's learning that he's passing on to me that pain. So if you think of a recipe, and we're all really proud to have our great grandma's recipe, which I have. And I talk about generation after generation of this recipe and how I've perfected it too. And I'm teaching my kids, and it's alive. That pain goes with it too. So that pain that she tells my dad, he's telling me that pain. And I've caught myself telling my children, who now it's 4 generations later, this pain that goes with it. So all of that wasn't present when I called Aaron. I was thinking what I was thinking. What an opportunity to get to be here. And so now we kind of walked you through a different perspective.
I don't know. I don't know what to say. I'm speechless. I really appreciate you using this example to share a lot about history and the personhood side and heritage um, of your tribes, and how you are working together in the present day. And so having now worked through this situation, this particular one, it's a snapshot to kind of explain some truths, some hard truths. How have you guys been able to work together a little bit? Can you go to the next slide, Glenna? Just to remind us. So how has this momentum built your relationship and maybe changed the way you do things moving forward?
Well, for me, one powerful thing that Aaron taught me that we all take for granted, and I'm being vague in that, but I think it's pretty, we don't talk about our relationships with people as a resource, and it's a cultural resource, and it's something we have to preserve as well. So when I got into this position, I told my supervisor, there will be a day when you want me to do something that I cannot do, because I can't ruin my relationship with my tribal people. Because growing up, I could see the difference in relationships and how it connects you to these places and how genuine it really is. And you are almost, they say teachers live in a glass house. Be careful what you do, because we see you in the public even when you're not teaching. They say that about officers. Even though you don't wear your uniform, we know you're the officer. So be careful what you do in public, because we're watching you at all times. But in Indian country, it's like that. You don't have to be in a position of power. You are all living in a glass house, and we know everything about you. So when you use your status as I'm a SKC alumni, I'm representing all these people. Or I say I'm a Blackfeet, I'm representing all these people. So Aaron taught me one time, I called him for advice on a situation, and he said, those relationships have to be very taken care of. And that's what I told my supervisor when I got hired. Don't put me in a position where I jeopardize that authenticity. I have to be worth my word, because these were my people before I got this job. We can't use that. And so how it's worked in our relationship is I have to be able to be confident enough to say, that won't work for us. This is what it's going to hurt. This is going to hurt our relationships. And so when we move forward and that momentum is rolling, and me and Aaron can laugh it off that I insulted him so much that day, that's Aaron being strong and forgiving and having grace on me. But it moved us. Now we can do fun projects, and I'm learning, and otherwise we stay in that world of contentment, And so it built momentum because we both could take our own ownership. I took ownership of my mistakes. So we had another project. I'm sorry, I have a cough, so I have to suck.
Wait, before we move on though, it's important to remember that liaisons, especially native liaisons that are tribal people, because there's a lot of, for those who don't know, there's a lot of liaisons who are not tribal. They're not enrolled in tribes. They're not descendants of tribes. It's just, but doesn't mean they're not doing good work. It's just, but for those that are closely connected to native communities and are members of tribes, our descendants, I still have a connection with their people. What you're asking them to do is actually quite a bit. It's putting their credibility out there. And really what you're doing as a liaison is you're utilizing your personal connections for professional reasons, and so I think it's important for agencies, both federal and state agencies, to always remember that if you do have a Native liaison, consider that what you're asking that person to do is to place their personal credibility among their own people out there. That's like really important, because one of the first conversations we had, I remember saying, we talked about that. We talked about, because the liaison thing's relatively new, so there's no like how-to book. And I work with a lot of them. I work with dozens of liaisons, and all are different. Not all of them are tribal. In fact, I think I only work with two that are Native people. And but what I do know is that the Native people, I can see the impact of their work going home with them, like it goes home with them, where that doesn't have to be the case with the non-Native liaisons. I'm not saying they don't care about it, but
An example of that is
we worry about Kqyn here, her mental health.
my bridge, there's cracks in this bridge. There's cracks, it needs some sealing. This past weekend I went to a reservation to get some fabric because I was looking for a certain kind, and I was already in that area. And then work called on Monday, and it was the same tribal representative, and I said, "Oh, I was just there, I was buying fabric." And because I had made them angry about something, he made me feel that it went on to my personal life. Like Aaron's saying, he said, "Don't you have fabric stores in Great Falls?" Instead of being like, "Oh, I'm glad you were here," or "What did you do?" or these things. So I knew I made him angry, that it's angry all the way around, not just, I shouldn't say I made them angry. Choices of my agency made them angry. And so I build, I repair, and I maintain relationships. We're in repair mode on that one. And so with our momentum, these things have got us going to where now Aaron has an ask of me is our next story. You can see behind us this really pretty eagle mount.
Well, this can only happen because of this momentum we're talking about. Connections, getting to know people, working together, getting to know each other, finding out she's thick-skinned, that I can say what I need to say, and vice versa, she says what she needs to say to me. So it's not always fun to hear.
I have respect, so I'm very respectful. So tell them what your ask was. It's very unique, and it's not a normal ask that you come across in the wildlife world.
Yeah, and this is a unique situation for me too. So, like I said, most of what my job is to enforce federal law. So, like I work a lot with MOAs, or memorandums of agreement, memorandums of understanding, PAs, and contracts, and we get bogged down in that, and like we can almost, it forces us to like lose sight of what we do and what our goals are, because it can turn into like HR. So I run a department, so I'm also like hiring, unfortunately firing. I have seasonal employees. I have a budget. I got to report to the legislature. So we get like really caught up in that, right? So when somebody approaches me about a cultural, like a truly cultural inquiry, I always enjoy them. It's the reason I do my job. But most of the time, it's paperwork, and it's budget meetings. So recently, I was approached by a guy. It's been maybe 4 months ago now, huh? 5 months
Oh,
ago.
it seems like a while.
And so, who's a ceremonial leader among the Crows. So we have our paramount ceremony among the Crows is called the Tobacco Society. It's a group of people whose job is to protect and preserve tobacco seeds. These seeds were given to us by the Creator. And the belief is that as long as we have these seeds, as long as we're planting the sacred tobacco, that we'll prosper as a people. Now, we were originally part of the Hidatsa people. So when we left the Hidatsa people in search of this seed and this plant, and in one version, we already had it, we were searching for where it would grow. Eventually, we found that home in the Bighorn Mountains. specifically Clouds Peak. So around Clouds Peak, which is now in Wyoming, is our belief is our home. So we still have those tobacco bundles, but in order to own those, to be a part of those ceremonies, a part of that group that cares for them, you go through an initiation process, and it's called an adoption. We call it an adoption. The Crow word is dakbasua, which means to have a child. So somebody will take you who's a member and adopt you into the society, and it's a long process. But for those people who run the ceremony, called the adoption ceremony, which is like our paramount, it's the big deal. So it's full of a lot of it's a reenactment of our migration. It's a reenactment of getting these tobacco plants and these seeds. And in order to run that, you have to own the right, the ceremonial right to be what's called a lodge erector. And there was a time where there was many of them. There was a lot of these lodge erectors, but now we only have 3 that are active. We have 5 that hold the ceremonial right, but only 3 still have that know the procedure and know how to do it, know what each one of these rites carry specific sacred objects, and these objects are used during the ceremony. The individual that came to me, his main, what did I say earlier? Patron spirit, like kind of like the thing behind it is a golden eagle, and it has to do with the origin of where this lodge erector rite comes from, and it comes from a guy named Chizabua. Chizabua, it means twines his tail, and through a long series of a dream and spiritual, I don't know what you would call them, awakenings, I don't know, fasting. He was fasting when this happened. This eagle showed him how to do this. So with that, when you leave the what they call the painting lodge, or what it's kind of a nickname, and you'll walk in a procession to the adoption lodge, which represents us becoming the Crow people. Leaving the painting lodge represents the Hidatsa. So we're leaving the Hidatsa, and we make this trek, and we stop 4 times, not looking backwards. But the person who leads us carries the sacred object of that person, whoever that is running the ceremony. Now we still have the original golden eagle, but it's so old, and it's kind of held in high regard that they don't use that anymore for the ceremony. They kind of use a dummy one, or like a proxy, I guess is probably the word. I'm trying to sound smart.
Proxy is good. It's kinder than a dummy one.
Yeah. So, but for a variety of reasons, this mounted eagle was not available. It's gone now. And so this guy's name is Jeff. He was asked to run the ceremony. He didn't have that. He didn't want to use the one that's still housed in the bundle. So he asked me. He came to my office one day and he said, it's kind of an emergency. I'm supposed to run this ceremony and I don't have this. So will you I went after it. I found him an eagle, but it was a bald eagle. Do you remember that? And I thought it would work. It turns out it won't work. They didn't want to break that rule of it being a golden eagle. So, but I did all that through the U.S. Wildlife Service. So after that kind of died out, I said, well, let me call Kqyn. I actually think I called Brenna first, and then by the time I talked to Kqyn, she had already talked to Brenna, so the ball was rolling. I said, this is what we need. We need an eagle. I'm trying to find out for sure if it has to be a golden eagle. So we were already looking. Kqyn went out of her way and found all kinds of eagles at the time, bald eagles, but then we identified.
You want a half eagle?
Yeah, you want half. Yeah.
You want an eagle that looks like a windshield? How do you want this eagle?
So then I explained what it was for, that they have to hold this eagle walking out of this, and it's really important. So she eventually found one, but it was still frozen. It was in the freezer here at Lake Elmo. By then time had passed, but I said, this is still going to be a problem. So I think we should just pursue it get the eagle anyway. That way, this isn't an issue for them anymore, and that ceremony can be done. And so, through the work of Kqyn, I guess myself, and even Jeff and the people in the Tobacco Society allowing it, and the taxidermist in Missoula, and the guy in Helena.
Yeah, we had a lot of FWP that felt that this was very important. I spoke with the Fish and Wildlife Service too to transfer this legally from the federal, possession to a tribal entity. So we got that first, and then we figured out where we could get the eagle from. And FWP has eagles. We gather and collect them in the field if they're, you can't possess those birds if they didn't die of natural causes. And so if you're a tribal member, you can have them if, we could go out and gather if it was a natural death. But if they're not, they go to a repository down in Colorado, and then they get permitted out. And that's how we got it. We got a permit from the federal government to give this eagle. And then Ryan out of Montana Wild does taxidermy himself, and he did it exactly how Aaron and the spiritual Jeff, who has the right to have that bird. And we're saying right as in RITE.
The ceremonial right.
And so some of these things, like one time I was in a ceremony and there was when we talk about berries and plants and gathering, there was one that was being used and we were burning it. And I said, man, this is wonderful. I want to go gather it. Where do you gather it? And again, lesson learned, you don't have the right to go gather that. You have to do all these things in order to get to go pick that, Kqyn. And it just made my mind think of all the people in Montana who go gather. And the tribes controlled and monitored and conserved even gathering, that you were the one who held that right. So he has the right to hold this eagle. We mounted it the way he wanted. And today is the day he gets it. So the momentum starts. And now not only is the ball rolling where me and Aaron have a pretty transparent relationship, so does Brenna, so does Ryan, and it goes on. And now I'm introducing him to people here in Region 5 in Billings that he can come, and they want him here for certain things, that it's just another partnership. There's no boundaries. There's these, we have friends and neighbors in other agencies that are our equivalent, fisheries in Montana, Fish, Wildlife, and Parks, fisheries at the BLM, fisheries at the federal level. Our tribal people have been here way before us, and we're just now getting some of these relationships, and it's no different. They're our neighbors.
None of this could have happened if we weren't willing to go through uncomfortable. That first example isn't like a life changing. It's not like, because in my field we have some pretty confrontational things, but it's a good example of something that's pretty innocent, really. Like, it's just some inviting, but it can mean so much more, which is probably more common than like a big issue.
Yes.
Those are like daily. Those things can happen daily, and this is an example of something that's not only fun to do. I learned a lot. Like, I didn't know this much about taxidermy. Like, I talked to the guy about taxidermy. I learned a lot. I learned more about the federal laws that are related to eagles, because it's not fully what I do, but I do kind of work on the outskirts of it. I learned that if something has purpose, it moves a lot faster, and if that purpose is clear. And even talking to what's the guy in Helena? What was his name? Ryan. Talking to Ryan. Sorry, Ryan, if you're on here. I don't know. Is he? Sorry. I give him like full credit for this, because had he not be willing to like do it, we would still because I can't do taxidermy, neither can you do.
And there wasn't taxidermists who were going to be able to do this that fast with what we wanted. And Ryan is an FWP employee who did it on his own time, because he was very, very passionate about helping the Crow.
I think he took it to Missoula, right?
Ryan, are you on? Chat us.
So he's kind of like the unsung hero, but I guess he's sung now, right?
Yeah, I don't get the credit. I just had the relationship, but we do have to take care of them. And so sometimes if I offend people by saying, I don't know if I could do that, that's gonna piss Aaron off, and I don't want that to come between the bigger things that we're working on. So we just have to talk a lot and ask a lot. You have to ask people when you feel uncomfortable with them. I had a lady who I did not know at all, and I mentioned something to her, and her look on her face, and I said, "What does that look on your face mean? Was it what I said?" Or, and it was not what I said, it was something else. And I was relieved. But if I had not asked her what that meant, I would be still thinking, this woman hates me. I insulted her, So you kind of have to be able to say things that you don't think and that you have to go, well, what does that mean? Because we're learning two different cultures. And I'm an urban Indian, and I'm still asking a lot of things.
What it comes down to is we got the ego. Everybody's winning. And I'm not going to share everything Ryan said to me, but he thought it was a pretty rewarding experience because he was very clear about how taxidermy is typically for like these kinds of things are for like trophies and people's accomplishments. But this had a direct impact on the perpetuation of something that's pretty paramount to us, And so sometimes we're hit with roadblocks and we figured it out. And it's all just because you got to be comfortable with each other. But I think that's it.
That's a great,
Bye. I'm just kidding.
No, we have some questions, and they're they're going to take some thought. So, what if you had to give some tips, summarize? You've given a lot of great advice during this conversation. What for folks who are either working with tribes, want to work with tribes, individual tribes, maybe from each of your perspective, can you every tribe is different. So maybe Aaron, you can talk about working with the Crow tribe, and Kqyn, you might have some insight, which you have. I mean, you ask, you realize that a lot of history wasn't that long ago. So we might think of it as long ago, but it really was within our lifetimes. So anything you want to summarize here, and then we'll move on to questions.
Well, I got a couple things. The first thing is be okay with being uncomfortable. Like, yeah, you got to really be okay with awkward situations, like asking questions, be as direct as possible. For me, I got to know what the ask is. I don't do well with like passive talk or like when there's a lot of I don't know, maybe is this this tell me how you feel or whatever. Like um I I guess I don't
Clear and concise.
be clear and concise. Like tell me what you want, I'll tell you if we can do it, and vice versa. Like I'm going to be pretty clear. I was very clear with Kqyn what I wanted. I wanted an eagle, and I wanted you to find me it. And I didn't want to have to leave my office to do any of it. And then the other thing is there's this weird belief out there that I need you, whoever you is, right? I'm using the universal you, that I need you to be like to all of a sudden adopt native beliefs to like work with me. So I need you to just be yourself. If you're awkward, be awkward. And I think we talked about this the other day, right? And I said, if you're awkward, be awkward. If you're straightforward, be straightforward. If that's not what you believe in, if you don't believe in prayer, don't all of a sudden come to me and be like a super spiritual person. Because what ends up happening is that you present to me a really weird, appropriated version of myself. I've walked into rooms where people all of a sudden have a conch shell on the meeting table. And I'm like, well, I doubt that was ever sitting there. And I have a funny story about going to a law firm to talk about a contract that we had with a power company and an energy company. I walk in there and they have law books all over. And right in the middle of the table was it was a book, Landmark Indian Law Cases. right?
So he took out all the books and put all his tribal books
So
in.
he put his Indian book in the middle of the table. And I'm like, I really doubt somebody was sitting in here and was doing a quick study session on the Marshall trilogy, you know, in landmark Indian law cases, you know. And it was really just this weird, what I'm sure they thought was like a wholesome gesture, but it almost kind of made the meeting awkward, you know, like it was kind of like, well, that's fake, you know, that's kind of not really what you guys were doing, you know. So those kinds of things I don't need. And most of the Crow people, I know that we don't need that. We need a domain. Give us a domain to talk about, a topic, and we'll figure out everything around it. It might take long, it might be, we might go off track, but for the most part, this is just what we need to do. And me myself, if I feel like I need to pray before a meeting, I usually do that on my own, and I go there, and usually it's not for the meeting, it's what I usually ask, that I don't say anything that's, because crows believe words are powerful, you know, so we don't want to say things that are taken the wrong way, or we want them to be taken directly. Like, we want this person to hear what I'm going to say, you know, so I don't want to have to sit here and repeat myself over and over and over and over, because the nature of my job can be very confrontational. So it's not like we're going into meetings all the time that are really like fun to be around.
I'll add a couple things. I remember going to a Blackfeet and meeting, and I said something about, well, the Salish and Kootenai do it and it's working. And I, you know, I had Salish and Kootenai examples because I was an alumni from there and I have relationships there. And he said, we're not Salish and Kootenai. And so I learned those things as an Indian woman too, you know, going tribe to tribe. So be prepared. You guys are going to learn just like I did. It doesn't matter what race you are, which also makes me tell you another thing. Indian people aren't all traditional or all speaking their native language. Not all of us speak. I'm French Hungarian. I don't know anything about French or Hungarian. So don't just assume because they're native, they speak, they're fluent, they're ceremonial, they're practicing all these things. They're individuals and they're human beings. And there's 8 nations. So we go to Canada, we go to Mexico, we go to Italy. All those are different. We may look alike because we're human beings, but they're different nations. They have different rules, different laws, different codes. So be respectful of and don't group them. And learn, ask them, learn from them, admit your ignorances and stuff. I do it all the time. You know, I don't know that. Tell me.
Just be cool, man.
Just be cool. Just be cool.
Yeah, that's a big, like, it's big. That's important. There's a romanticism that's given to us. Not all of us, not everybody is in a position like I am, where I work directly with culture. So not only is my life culture, my work is culture. So that's not the case. I'm not the norm. If that was the norm, my job wouldn't exist, because we would all be advocates for our culture, and that's not the case. I think the majority of Native people are actually it's the opposite. I think we're pursuing the American dream as part of the whole boarding school thing, but we don't need to get into that right now. That's a different talk.
There is a challenging question on here from Mike, and I'd like to, what do you think? Can you read that one for us?
Yeah, and Lily, Mike and Lily both are wondering about the willingness, I'm assuming from, you know, your perspective from the Crow tribe and yours, Kqyn, about outdoor recreation businesses and operating outdoor recreation businesses, and what your general feelings about outdoor recreation are.
I'm not going to answer Mike's number because he keeps our question, because he keeps telling me he's going to call me and he never does. I'm just kidding.
Okay, how about Lily's question?
Yeah, good job, Diane. See?
Lily's question is,
You did it right.
what is your perspective on the
right.
concept
Mike
of the
Penfold has my
potential
number
of
and
outdoor
my email.
recreation?
I'm just
I'm
kidding.
going to say a couple of things from the state perspective is, I think some of these tribes want to get into tourism and they want to get into small businesses, and there's grants available for tribal enrolled members to open small businesses and stuff. I think whether that's the Department of Commerce or Department of Labor, wherever you guys are asking this, I don't know, Mike or Lily, but I think getting out there and doing some of your own outreach, because heck yeah, they want to do that. And if it's tribally owned, it's gonna, that's what they're looking for. They want to keep their sovereignty. They want to stay within their own. But I think there's room for. I try to blend them or bring them together in ways that I can. But I also think they're good, the state and the tribes, to be separate. And so it just. I don't know if they're just asking if we think it's good or bad or what
Why
after that.
the Crow have a good reservation. There's a lot of potential for outdoor recreation. Well, there's people like fishing guides, crow
Mhm.
fishing guide companies, crow outfitters for big game hunting, and
Mm-hmm.
you can buy outdoor recreation permits, annual passes for the reservation that encompasses everything like hiking,
Mhm.
snowmobiling, and people do use them. As far as individual businesses, there are some. I think there's always room for stuff like that. But at the same time, I think you're talking more about the Crow people and not the Crow tribal government. Those are different. And I think it's important for people to remember when you talk about Crow people, you should distinguish the Crow citizenship versus the Crow government, right? And I don't think it's necessarily the job of the government
Mm-hmm.
to be the primary employer of a people anywhere. I think that's a danger. That's dangerous when you do that. It can create a negative dependency. But I do think the Crow tribe does encourage Crow people to start businesses. We have an office that's dedicated just to that, right? The secretary's office of the tribe is in charge of the filing of LLCs and things like that, and nonprofits, and I know that that number is going up in everything. So not just recreation, but yes, Mike. I was just teasing you, Mike. But every time I do see you, you say I got to talk to you about something, and then we don't talk. So I'm getting offended now. I'm just kidding.
Um,
So I think overall, yes, there is a lot of potential. I agree. And then there are people starting and who are interested, but I think it seems to be heavy in the construction though, like a lot of construction contracting and businesses, but I do know there is some recreation happening.
Mm-hmm.
well, we
We don't have a
have
large population base, so I don't know how many each person would have to own like 5 businesses, you know.
Mm-hmm.
um, we have 1 minute left in our hour. It went really quickly. I want to point out in the chat, and I believe the chats are gonna move with the recording. Rochelle Brown at the Office of Tribal Tourism has made the call to folks that they're always seeking native to support native businesses, and they have grant funds available to help establish those businesses. So that's one resource. And let's move through there was one more question about referencing sovereign nations in writing. Is there a resource for accurate spelling and punctuation? Maybe we can, yeah, go
Really
if
quick,
you,
I'll just say I wouldn't speak on behalf of the Crow. I'm not Crow. I wouldn't speak on behalf of the Blackfeet. So what I would do is I would say, let's call them and ask them what you're referencing. What do you want? What are you writing down and what do they want? Because, but so remember, I'm the bridge. I'm not this side of the land or this side of the land. I'm the bridge. So I'll just align it for you. So you can email me those questions. I don't create things on their behalf. They have to do that. That's their nation. And sometimes some of those decisions go all the way up to the chairman, which is equivalent to a president. and so it's things like us for state government. We can't make that decision. It just goes up the chain to the governor. So we have to just see what you're asking, and I'll go find it for you.
That is great advice and great resource. Thank you,
Well, I
Kqyn.
think this is actually a simpler question. I think this is just simply more about how you want us, how we should be referred to as in writing, right? Like I, I thought.
I didn't know if they were saying, look at there, or does each nation establish their own preferred English translated naming? So like,
That's called orthography, I
see,
believe.
okay, maybe it's a question for Aaron, but as a liaison, I wouldn't do anything. I would find a person who could
Oh, it
answer
is a
that.
question for me. It says this question is for Aaron. No, I'm just kidding.
Oh, I was gonna say, I saw liaison.
You guys are too serious. This is the most serious
Yeah,
event.
crickets from the
Yeah,
crowd.
yeah.
Hey,
So I think in simple terms, what I would say, um overall it's situational what you're using it for. But if you're just talking about like tribal names, OPI actually did a big project on tribal names and what you should call them and all that, and how those are spelled in the orthographies of those people. So I think that's kind of what you're asking, right, Sarah?
And that's the Office of Public Instruction.
OPI, call us,
OPI.
call me.
Yeah, reach out.
And
So,
Lily, go Bison.
to finish up here, our next episode is our second to the last one. It's Harmony in the Wild, strategies for mitigating human wildlife conflict. And we're going to visit with folks in Shodo and on the in the Shodo area and on that side of the divide to talk just about how bears are moving and what some ranchers in rural communities are doing to mitigate conflicts in areas where it hasn't been as customary. So next slide. Save the date. Our conference, we're going to do an in-person one in Billings, October 21st to the 23rd. And so mark your calendars. You'll be hearing more about that, and you'll hear more from us as we plan content. And last slide is to thank everyone for showing up. Hey, Aaron and Kqyn, special thanks to you for sharing honestly and forthrightly your experiences. And I hope this will continue the conversation that we can all have moving forward. And
Yes,
Mike,
thank you for having us.
I hope you give Aaron a call. Really.
Mike, call us.
I'm really worried. We're going on years.
And then he's
Okay.
gonna say, Mike who? Mike who? I know a lot of Mikes.
All right. Thanks, everyone. And tune in the next time.
Thank you, guys.